Eskom says it will implement a rotating schedule of Stage 5 and Stage 6 load shedding from today, and the utility will then reduce power cuts to Stage 5 during the day until 4 p.m. Now, this will resume, this is rather when Stage 6 will resume for the evening peak from 4 p.m. and that will continue until 5 a.m. the following day. And this pattern will then be repeated until further notice. So the continuing Stage 6 load shedding is worrying for South Africa as winter is fast approaching and the demand is of course expected to increase. Energy experts are predicting that things are only going to get worse as the weather gets colder. So to discuss energy generation capacity of Eskom, we joined in studio by Clyde Mallinson, Director at Virtual Energy and Power and Clean Energy Projects and a regular commentator about South Africa's electricity problems. Clyde, good to have you in studio with us this morning.
Pleased to be here, thanks.
So, of course, South Africans are very concerned. We haven't hit winter yet, and already we seem to be on Stage 6 almost permanently, at least if the last few weeks are anything to go by. So the question is, what are we in for?
Well, perhaps the best way I can describe it is to actually show South Africans what our load is likely to be in winter, and how we build up our generation capacity to meet that load. And I've got some graphics that I've brought along to be able to demonstrate that.
As we get into that, Clyde, just talking about Stage 6 and Stage 8, because we were told by energy experts that actually we had already hit Stage 8 last week, and this was not the first time this year. So let's talk to that. When do we know which stage we are on, especially differentiating between Stage 6 and 8 at this point?
Right, so I don't want to get too distracted by that because there's quite a lot of semantics. So basically we have had a shortfall in excess of 7,000, but that shortfall is met where we get about 2,000 from the energy intensive users, and they don't have load shedding, they have what's called load curtailment. So you can't switch mines and smelters on and off. They have to reduce their load. They use about 10,000 megawatts, and they're able to reduce their load by 20%, which gives us 2,000. If they go beyond 20%, they might as well shut down. You can kind of get away with 20%, but imagine now if you're going underground on a mine, you can't stop the ventilation blowing, these various things. So the whole mining and smelting industry would more or less shut down if they go beyond 20%. So they give us 2,000 megawatts from load curtailment. The rest of us use about 15,000 megawatts. That's the towns and the cities and the farmers and everyone else. And we have load shedding. So if we're short of 8, they give us 2 and we have to give 6. And the 6 and 2 makes 8. So it's really a bit of a storm in a teacup. It's semantics. We have been short of nearly 8, but it's made up from 2 from the energy intensive users and 6 from the rest of us. So let's talk about what we're in for in terms of the energy availability factor. And just to that point, when we talk about the electricity minister, what he is meant to do in terms of helping us ride the storm, we don't see much at the moment, but you've got some scenarios that you're going to talk us through in terms of what we have, in terms of energy availability and, of course, some of the mitigating factors. Yeah, well, the problem is you can't, with sheer willpower, change the performance of the coal fleet, I'm afraid. So what I've got here is this is what our demand profile is likely to look like in winter. So this red line shows the whole country's demand, and you can see it goes up in gigawatts. So each gigawatt is 20 gigawatts is 20,000. So each gigawatt is a stage of load shedding, if you like. And this is an average load profile. So it's for each hour of the day. It's actually sometimes a bit more dramatic than that because this is an average. So this includes the weekends and the weekdays. Now, in order to meet this demand, we first of all switch on nuclear. So let's see if we can switch on nuclear. We should be, there we go. We've switched on nuclear. Luckily, nuclear came back recently. Remember, the second unit at Coburg was down for a while. So we've now got nuclear at the bottom there. And now we can say, well, what about a bit of hydro? If we bring in some hydropower from Cahora Bassa, and if we bring, there we go, we've got our hydro. So we're starting to build up our supply. Now comes the big one. Let's have coal, please. Aha, there's the coal. So this coal, I'm showing it as a flat line there. It's never flat. It actually goes up and down a bit. But at the moment, there's no reason for it to go up and down because it doesn't even produce enough for our nighttime load. This is nighttime load. So it doesn't produce enough for our nighttime load even. So right, what have we got next? I can't remember. Oh, there we go. We've got some wind. So we've put some wind in, and the reason the wind looks so steady is because we're looking at an average over the month. And the first thing that's happened now is we're seeing a little bit of green there, which is coming out of storage, because you can see here the wind has intersected the demand, so there's a bit spare, so it goes into storage, and it can then come out of storage. Let's put some solar in. There we go. There's some solar, and you can see a little bit of storage coming in as well now. And then we can put in our famous gas, our OCGTs, that run on diesel. There's the OCGTs. Now, there's a problem with this, and that is that Eskom doesn't have a budget to run the OCGTs at this level. If we ran them like this, we would spend 100 billion rand a year on diesel. So we don't have that budget. So if we look at the next one, we'll see that actually just go back to the previous one. Yeah, the next one should show a reduction in the diesel. Let's see if that happens.
Yeah.
Okay, so we can go to the next slide because we actually can't use that much diesel. So let's see the next one, please. Yes, there it is. So that's the amount of diesel Eskom actually have budget for. And the gap between what we're able to supply in the line is, guess what? What's that gap? That gap is the shortfall, and that's what leads to load shedding. It means we're not supplying enough to meet our demand. So we've got a great big gap, particularly in the evening peak there. So what do we do? Yeah, have you got a hint?
Yeah, because that's very worrying, because it seems to show that for the most part, we will not be able to meet demand.
Yes. Now I need to go back a slide if you don't mind. Right, and if you just show the very next one, it will show we're going to have stage 6 load shedding. We're going to drop that red curve. Right, we've dropped the red curve. This seems to have skipped a slide. This is basically what we could have if we had built 8,000 megawatts of solar, 5,000 gigawatts of wind, and 3,000 megawatts of storage. This is where we could have been at the moment if we had actually treated it as the emergency that it is. Unfortunately, we didn't do this. And you can see now that the wind and the solar and the storage, and now our diesel can run at full speed because it's only running at peak time. It's not trying to run all the time. That's where we could have been, and we aren't. So let's look at some load shedding predictions. This is a prediction for all of this year. So this is the Eskom coal fleet availability factor, or the capacity factor.
What should it be ideally?
It should ideally be 70, but my table goes from 40 to 60. We're never going to see 70. So ideally it should be 70, but at the moment it's hovering at around 44. Right? So I've produced this table in January, and it says based on what the coal fleet is doing, we can predict what load shedding we're going to have. Maximum load shedding. So if you look on the right there, in January it actually dropped as low as 39. So when it was 39, it's not even on my table, I predicted we would have stage 6 load shedding And if you look across on the right, it was 5.5 thousand megawatts which were reduced, which is essentially stage 6. February, it dropped to 38. No, I didn't have it on my table. I thought 40 is as low as I want to go. And it said 7, and what was it? 6.399. So it was basically stage 7. In March, it improved slightly, and it was at 43 at its lowest point, which is 5.5, and I predicted 5. So it's about correct. Here's the scary bit, though, is in April, it's already dropped to 40. And so we've had a shortfall of 8. But remember, a shortfall of 8, we can get 2 from the energy-intensive users, and we can get 6 from the rest of us. So I haven't got May in here. I've put June, which is winter. If the coal fleet manages to not go below 45, we will see stage 8.
If it doesn't.
If it doesn't. If it drops as low as it has been in the last while, we'll see stage 11.
Just to pause there, in terms of the coal fleet and its management.
Yes.
So what seems to be the problem there?
It's an aging fleet, and some people have said, well, some of the old ones work better than some of the new ones. Some people look after their cars better than other people. So Letabo, for example, is the same age as Tutuka, if I'm not mistaken. The one works well and the other one doesn't work well. The one's been looked after well, the other one hasn't been looked after well. And if you haven't looked after something well, it's almost impossible to get it back to its pristine operational state. Very, very difficult.
And that power station, Tutuka, still has a few years left.
Many years left, but it's running. It often runs at 30% capacity factor.
Yes, at some point it was running at 12%. So
well, I haven't seen 12
because of some of the reports that I put out. But it's crazy. Why isn't it running optimally?
Well, there's a whole long story there. We know about the corruption there, but it's more complicated than that. A coal plant is a complicated thing. It's got a feeding system, so the quality of the coal, if you don't give it the right quality coal, it affects the way that the mills grind that coal and inject powder into the boilers. So if you feed something the wrong food, it doesn't do well. If you give a car the wrong octane petrol, if you give diesel into a petrol car, then it breaks it.
But it's an interesting question with Tutuka Power Station, because they've got that Seriti mine there.
Yes.
The New Denmark mine, and so they don't have the issue about transporting the coal via a road, because they've got a conveyor belt there. So surely, if there's a problem with the coal, they can figure it out and resolve it.
I suspect Tutuka's biggest problem is with water. I think a lot of the water in the system, so you've got heat exchangers, cooling towers, I think the water's got a lot of calcium or build-up in it. And it's clogged up the pipes like cholesterol, if you like. So Tutuka, to a certain extent, is suffering from cholesterol, in that a lot of its water systems in Tutuka are actually blocked up. So the cooling towers aren't working properly. The heat exchangers aren't working properly. As I said, coal plants are very complex systems, and it's not just the main turbine and the generator. It's the feeding, the milling, the cleaning of the nappy afterwards. Remember, one of the plants, I think it was Camden, had to stop because the pile where they put the ash from the boilers was full. The tailings dam was full. So it's almost as if your rubbish bin is full and you have to stop eating because you've got nowhere to put your rubbish, basically.
That's very disconcerting, because these are not insurmountable problems. These are things that one would imagine can be taken care of, quite simply.
Well, the problem is when you've got a declining performance of the fleet, it means the other ones have to pick up extra load. So the ones that are working very hard. It's almost like an office space. There's some workers who work hard, and the harder they work, the more the ones who don't work hard can slack off, kind of thing. But those ones that are working hard, what starts happening? Stress, nervous breakdown, etc. So I don't want to say the coal fleet's got having a nervous breakdown, but it's akin to that, if you like.
So
We're having a nervous breakdown.
As we bottom line this,
Yes.
with regard to winter now, and you've showed us June, so what are we likely to see if things don't improve?
As a country, the best we can do is kit up with blankets, kit up with jerseys, try not to use your heaters this winter, because the country, quite frankly, is going to be on the edge. It's going to be on the edge with regard to meeting that supply-demand gap, particularly at peak times in winter, where we could go beyond stage 11, as I indicated. And then it's basically stage 8 is already shut down for half the day. So we don't even want to think about it. But remember, it's a mitigating factor to stop the whole grid from collapsing. And remember also that there are lots of shoots, green shoots if you like, of new wind and solar. And I showed in the diagram how an addition of wind and solar and storage can easily meet the shortfall that we're experiencing.
As we wait to see how this is going to be dealt with. Clyde Mallinson, thank you so much, energy expert, speaking to us about energy generation capacity of Eskom, as there are concerns, of course, about load shedding at high levels, especially as we approach the winter months.